Thank you, committee. I think you all done a wonderful job. We have so many hard workers. You would not believe how fast we get here and start preparing for everything. They've just helped out so much. You just call any of them and they're right. They do a great job.
This time we'd like to invite our guest speaker up, and it's Valerie Pritchard Sellers.
Hello, how are you guys doing this evening? Good. Well, like you said, I'm Valerie Pritchard Sellers. I am the daughter of Glenn Pritchard, which most of you that knew him probably call him Jody. My dad, as many of you probably know, passed away 3 months ago of cancer. And he was only 53 years old at the time, and today he would have been 54 years old. So he celebrated 53 birthdays, but we hope that he would have celebrated a lot more. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay. So I just really want to talk about a lot about the kind of man my dad was, and really how that correlates in what we're doing here today and what we're trying to accomplish. I recently read a quote that really reminded me of my dad, and of all people was by Jimi Hendrix. So he says, "I'm the one that's got to die when it's time for me to die, so let me live my life the way I want to." Those of you that know my dad know or knew that he was very strong-willed and did whatever he wanted and exactly the way he wanted, no matter what anybody else said. And so he lived his life the way he wanted. He was a fighter. He was an extremely hard worker with a never-give-up attitude. And he's always had these qualities, but once he was diagnosed with his cancer, these qualities really shine through. My dad was always up for anything fun, exciting, outdoorsy, as long as he was the one in charge of it, of course, and made all the decisions. He was up for it. Especially if it involved four-wheelers, motorcycles, hunting, camping, roasting chickens. He really enjoyed the outdoors, whether it was working outside, building a house, or having fun with one of his many toys, or growing and maintaining his garden. You could always find him outdoors, or in the winter months in his garage, doing something. He was the kind of man that never really sat around and watched TV, except for maybe an occasional Western on a Sunday morning or afternoon. He was always working or playing on something, and that's what he loved to do. And again, this is before his diagnosis. You know, as a child, I always, some of my memories of my dad growing up was, you know, he worked all day, but then he came home and did stuff all evening. I mean, he'd take a short little cat nap, then he'd be right back up after dinner, you know, working out in the yard, going back to his cabin doing work, again out in his garage. I mean, he never stopped. I tell you this because cancer never stops, right? I mean, it never sleeps, it never leaves us alone. And my dad never stopped either. I like the fact that Relay for Life really signifies that, you know, that we relay all night because of what these patients go through. You know, but my dad, he decided he was not going to let cancer dictate his life, and he wasn't going to stop either, no matter what the cancer was doing to him and his body. When he was diagnosed 2.5 years ago, it was already stage 4, which, as most of you probably know, is not a good prognosis initially. But he was determined to beat cancer. He was willing to do any and all treatments. He had chemotherapy for the entire 2.5 years of his diagnosis until he passed away. He, while doing chemo, also endured CyberKnife and radio frequency ablation. You know, he was put in the hospital multiple times, He was given blood transfusions, he was given platelets, his lung collapsed twice and had to have the chest tube put in and then removed. And that is the one thing that I always remember him talking about being the most painful, was them putting the chest tube in and taking it out. He never talked about the chemo treatments or the CyberKnife or him being tired from the treatments. But he did not like that chest tube being put in and taken out. That was painful. He asked to have second opinions. He went to Duke. It was a few months after he was diagnosed for a second opinion. And then about a year later, he then also went to Ohio State. So he was determined. He was not going to give up. This, to me, sounds like enough to make anyone want to give up and stop living their life. But again, I want to reiterate, he did just the opposite. He continued on with his life as if he was healthy, just like the rest of us. So, my dad, as you've probably read in the Lincoln Journal multiple times, was a national GNCC four-wheeler racing champion. And the race is where this all began. He was racing in South Carolina, doing very well at the time, when his very competitive nature got the best of him, and he wanted to get around the slow traffic. Well, if any of you know anything about GNC racing, there's really not much slow traffic, but my dad thought he was faster than everyone else. So he went through a grassy area to get around them where he could not see a huge tree stump. Of course, he hit the tree stump, flipped over his four-wheeler, I think a couple of times, and threw him off the four-wheeler. He was rushed to the local ER there in South Carolina, where he was told he had 11 broken bones. And oh, by the way, you have cancer. I mean, as I'm sure my mom was with them, I'm sure they were both stunned at the time. I mean, that's not what you're expecting after, during a four-wheeler race, to go to the hospital and find out, yeah, you're expecting some broken bones, probably not 11. But he was also told he had cancer. So he and my mom immediately wanted to get home. She loaded up everything in the RV herself, including my dad. I mean, I'm sure she had some help, but they had been camping during the race weekend. And she drove that RV home herself, 8 hours, straight to St. Mary's Medical Center. And that's something else. I can't imagine what was going through their minds during that ride from South Carolina all the way to St. Mary's Medical Center. I didn't know what was going on at the time. They arrived at St. Mary's with, of course, lots of tests, lots of different physicians, and yes, he did have and was diagnosed then with stage 4 lung cancer. But like I said, he started immediately with his treatment. And not only did he start immediately with his treatment, as soon as those 11 broken bones were healed, he was back up. He was back to work. My dad owns his own construction business. He was back to building houses and doing the work that he does a lot for Lincoln Primary Care Center. He planted his garden that spring. This happened in April. Planted and maintained his garden that spring and all summer long. I mean, he wasn't going to give up. He, even after his broken bones healed and got back on this four-wheeler, he raced several more races, GNCC races, while going through chemo and the CyberKnife and the RFA, and he won some of those. He did then have another accident, unfortunately, during the race and broke his leg, where he lost full mobility of his leg. So that forced him not to be able to ride his four-wheeler any longer. But again, through the wheelchair that he was in for his broken leg and then onto crutches, he went to every one of his chemo treatments, didn't complain. This was a man that he got up every day and pushed through. He got up in the mornings, he would go to the job site first, then he would go get his chemo treatment, then he would go back to the job site and finish his work day. I mean, I'm sure he'd stop and take a nap or something, but I mean, he didn't stop. He didn't give up. I'm sorry, I missed something. Just back Memorial Day weekend, he had an opportunity to race in another GNCC race on a Polaris RZR, which for those of you who don't know what those are, that's like a side-by-side. It kind of looks like a small Jeep. So he could do that without the mobility of his leg. And my husband Rob was his co-pilot in this race, and they came in 6th place. My dad passed away 2 months later. So 2 months before he passed, he was still going. It was either 1 or 2 weeks before he passed, he and my mom went for a RZR ride. 1 week, she's back there telling me 1 week. 1 week before he passed away, they went for a RZR ride all day on a Saturday. The day before he passed away, he walked from one end of the house to the other multiple times. Because he didn't want people to see him laying around. My point is that he never stopped. Obviously, I've said that multiple times, I know. He kept going until his very last breath. He kept going. We were there with him that morning. He just wanted to get up so bad out of bed. And we tried to help him get up, and we put him back in bed, and he just, of course, he couldn't get comfortable. But it was like he still had that drive. He wanted to go so bad, and his body would not let him. My dad was, as I said, very competitive, and he was very competitive with cancer. He wasn't going to let that get the best of him. Ultimately, it did, but he put up a hard fight. 2.5 years with stage 4 lung cancer is a fight. And I know I've talked a lot about him, but my point I'm trying to make here is that's the night we're doing relay. All the fundraising we're going to do up until then, we can't stop. We got to raise more money than we did last year. We can't stop. We got to get more people involved. We got to get more people, involved with their own health to help prevent them becoming diagnosed with cancer. None of us can stop. As caregivers, we can't stop. If you know someone fighting cancer right now, don't let them give up. Don't let them stop. Don't tell them, oh, you need to take it easy. No, let them go and exercise if they want, or ride their four-wheeler, or work in their garden. That's going to keep them going. That's going to keep them fighting. Not laying in bed and resting. In this life, we get way too caught up on measuring greatness on material possessions and wealth. It is the strength of the character of the people that differentiates the great from everybody else. It is the internal drive and tenacity that separates great people from the rest. And I had an opportunity to witness this. I got to watch my dad handle adversity and setbacks and bad news. He never complained. He never acted like it got him down. He started and maintained the strength of the family during all of this. So, again, that's how we need to be as a community fighting cancer. I hate cancer. I mean, it has affected so many people in my family. All my grandparents have died of cancer. Now my father has died of cancer. My daughter will never really know who he is and what a great person he was. I mean, I hate it. I want it gone. And I think all of us should want it gone as well. And we have to never stop until it's gone.
Watch a video now of a survivor story.